The invitation arrived on a crisp September morning, tucked into an ivory envelope with my name, Eleanor Brooks, scrawled in elegant cursive.
I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, wen the mailslot klattert.
The envelope stood out among the usual bills and flyers, its weight hinting at something deliberate. I slit it open, revealing a cream-colored card embossed with roses. Join us for a garden party at Willow House, it read, to celebrate family and new beginnings. Saturday, September 20, 2025, at 2 p.m. hosted by Margaret Brooks. Margaret, my stepmother, had a knack for theatrics. A garden party in autumn, with her manicured estate as the backdrop, was peak Margaret, showy, polished, and calculated. I hadn't seen her in months, not since the tense Christmas dinner where she'd gushed about her perfect family, while my younger sister, Clara, stared at her plate in silence. Clara, at 22, had never warmed to Margaret, and I couldn't blame her. Our father's remarriage 5 years ago, barely a year after Mom's death, felt like a betrayal. I leaned back in my chair, the invitation dangling between my fingers. At 30, I'd built a life in the city, freelance writing, a small apartment, a routine that kept me grounded. But Willow House, our childhood home an hour's drive away, always pulled me back. Dad left it to Margaret in his will when he died 3 years ago, a decision that still stung. Clara and I had scattered memories of Mom in that house. Her laughter in the kitchen, her books on the shelves. Now it was Margaret's domain, redecorated to erase any trace of her. My phone buzzed. A text from Clara, "You got the invite?"
Yeah, I typet back.
You going? Only if you do. I'm not facing her alone. I sighed. Clara's resentment toward Margaret ran deeper than mine. She'd been 17 when Dad remarried, still raw from losing Mom. Margaret's attempts to play mother, reorganizing Clara's room, enrolling her in activities, only pushed her further away. I tried to mediate, but Clara's anger was a live wire.
Fine, I replied.
We'll go together. The week passed in a blur of deadlines and restless nights. By Saturday, I was behind the wheel of my old sedan, Clara in the passenger seat, her arms crossed. She wore a black sweater and jeans, defiance in every thread. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her jaw was set, her eyes fixed on the road. You okay? I asked, glancing at her. She shrugged. I just don't get why we're doing this. Margaret's fake parties, fake smiles.
It's à chaud.
Maybe, I said, keeping my tone neutral. But it's one afternoon. We'll eat, make small talk, and leave. Clara snorted.
You're too nice, Ellie.
She's probably got some agenda. I didn't argue. Margaret always had an angle, new business ventures, social climbing, or flaunting her control over Willow House. Still, I hoped a few hours of civility might ease the tension. We arrived at Willow House just after 2. The estate sprawled across acres of rolling lawn, the colonial-style mansion gleaming white against a backdrop of fiery autumn trees. Margaret had transformed the garden into a vision of elegance, white tables draped with linen, floral centerpieces, and a string quartet playing softly. Guests milled about, holding champagne flutes, their laughter floating on the breeze. Margaret spotted us immediately. She glided over, her blonde hair swept into an updo, her emerald dress hugging her frame. At 50, she looked every bit the polished hostess, her smile as practiced as her handshake. Eleanor, Clara, how wonderful you're here, she exclaimed, air-kissing my cheek. Her perfume was overpowering, like roses left too long in a vase. Thanks for inviting us, I said, forcing a smile. Clara said nothing, her expression blank. Margaret's eyes flickered over her, but she pressed on.
Come, meet Everione.
We're celebrating family today. She led us through the crowd, introducing us to neighbors, business associates, and a few distant cousins I barely remembered. I nodded politely, aware of Clara trailing behind, her silence louder than the chatter. At one point, I caught her staring at the garden's edge, where a row of rosebushes marked the boundary of Mom's old flowerbed. Her eyes narrowed, and I wondered what she was thinking. We settled at a table with plates of quiche and fruit. Margaret flitted between guests, her laughter ringing out. I tried to make conversation with a cousin, but Clara barely touched her food, her gaze distant.
What's wrong?
I whispered, leaning toward her. She shook her head.
This place.
It's not ours anymore. She's erased Mom. I followed her gaze to the rose bushes. Mom had planted them years ago, a labor of love. Margaret had likely kept them for aesthetics, not sentiment. I reached for Clara's hand, but she pulled away. I'm fine, she muttered, though her voice trembled.
The afternoon dragged on.
Margaret gave a toast about new chapters, her eyes lingering on me and Clara as if we were props in her narrative. I clapped politely, but Clara didn't move, her face a mask. I nudged her, hoping she'd at least pretend, but she refused to smile. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light over the garden, Clara stood abruptly. I need air, she said, and walked toward the rose bushes. I started to follow, but a guest pulled me into conversation. From the corner of my eye, I saw Clara kneel by the flower bed, her hands brushing the soil. Minutes later, she returned, her expression unreadable. She sat beside me, her hands smudged with dirt. What were you doing? I asked quietly. She didn't answer, but her eyes gleamed with something I hadn't seen in years: purpose. The party wound down, guests trickling out. Margaret approached, her smile tighter now. I hope you enjoyed yourselves, she said, her tone implying we hadn't. It was lovely, I said, standing. Clara stayed seated, her silence deafening. As we drove home, Clara stared out the window, her hands clasped in her lap. I wanted to ask about the rose bushes, the dirt, her mood, but something told me to wait. Whatever had happened in that garden, it wasn't over. The drive back to the city was quiet, the hum of the engine filling the space where words should have been. Clara stared out the passenger window, her hands still smudged with dirt from the rose bushes. I gripped the steering wheel, my mind replaying the garden party. Margaret's polished smile, the guests' chatter, and Clara's sudden trip to the flower bed. Something had shifted in her, but she wasn't ready to share. It was September 21, 2025, the day after the party, when Clara finally broke her silence. I was at my apartment, sorting through emails, when my phone rang. Her name flashed on the screen, and I answered immediately. Ellie, you need to come over, she said, her voice low and urgent.
Now. Where are you?
I asked, already grabbing my keys.
My place. I found the meeting at the party.
You'll want to see it. Clara lived in a cramped studio on the edge of town, a 30-minute drive from my apartment. I arrived just before noon, the autumn air sharp as I climbed the stairs to her third-floor walk-up. She opened the door before I could knock, her dark hair loose and her eyes wide. She wore the same black sweater from yesterday, now streaked with faint dirt marks.
What's going on?
I asked, stepping inside. Her apartment was a mess, books stacked on the floor, dishes in the sink, but my attention went straight to the small wooden box on her coffee table. It was caked in soil, its edges worn, as if it had been buried for years. Clara shut the door and pointed at the box.
I dug it up yesterday.
In Mom's rose garden. I froze. You what? At the party, she said, her words tumbling out. When I went to the rose bushes, I wasn't just sulking. I remembered something. Mom used to talk about hiding things in the garden, like a time capsule. I don't know why it hit me then, but I started digging. And I found this. I approached the table, my heart thudding. The box was about the size of a hardcover book, its surface etched with faint carvings, vines or flowers, hard to tell under the grime. A rusty latch held it closed. Have you opened it? I asked. She nodded, her expression a mix of excitement and dread. It's a diary. Mom's diary.
The words hit like a punch.
Our mother, Anna, had been a writer, always scribbling in notebooks. After her death 6 years ago, we'd found a few of her journals, but they were mundane, grocery lists, appointment reminders. If this was hers, buried in the garden, it was different.
Deliberate.
Clara lifted the lid, revealing a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed but intact. The cover was embossed with a single word, Anna. I reached for it, my fingers trembling, but Clara grabbed my wrist. Wait, she said. You need to know, it's not just memories. There's stuff in there about Margaret. And Dad. Stuff that changes things. I pulled my hand back, my mouth dry. What kind of stuff? She hesitated, then opened the diary to a marked page. The handwriting was unmistakably Mom's, slanted and precise. Clara pointed to an entry dated April 15, 2018, a year before Mom's cancer diagnosis. "I saw Margaret again today," the entry began. "She came to the house while David was at work. She thinks I don't know about her and him, but I'm not blind. She's not just his colleague. She's after everything. Our home, our family." I confronted her, and she laughed. Said I couldn't stop what was coming. "I'm writing this because I need proof. If anything happens to me, this is why." I stared at the page, my pulse racing. "This can't be right," I whispered. "Mom never said anything about an affair." Clara's jaw tightened.
Keep reading.
The next few entries detailed more encounters. Margaret's visits, Dad's late nights, Mom's growing suspicion. One passage described a fight where Mom threatened to tell Dad's business partners about Margaret's scheming. The final entry Clara showed me, dated June 10, 2018, was chilling.
"I'm scared. Margaret came by again.
She said if I don't back off, I'll regret it. I've hidden this diary in the garden, where no one will look. If you're reading this, Eleanor or Clara, trust your instincts."
Schieß dangerous. I steppet back, my legs unsteady.
This is. Mom thought Margaret was a threat? Like, physically.
Clara closet the diary, Herr Hans checking.
It's not just that. Think about it, Ellie. Mom got sick a year after this. Cancer, sure, but what if it wasn't just cancer? What if Margaret did something? That's a leap, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Mom's illness had been sudden, her decline brutal. We'd never questioned it. Ovarian cancer was a beast. But now, doubt crept in like a shadow. "We need to know more," Clara said. "The diary stops in 2018, but there's got to be other evidence. At Willow House. Margaret's still there, sitting on everything Mom left behind." I rubbed my temples, trying to process. At 30, I'd prided myself on being rational, but this was unraveling me. If Mom had been right, if Margaret had been manipulative or worse, what did that mean for us?
For that's des? For the life we'd lost?
What do we do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Clara's eyes hardened.
We go back. To Willow House.
We confront her, or we find proof. I'm not letting this go. I wanted to argue, to say we should think it through, but the diary's words burned in my mind. Mom had hidden it for us, a message across time. Ignoring it felt like betraying her. "Okay," I said finally. "But we need a plan. We can't just storm in." Clara nodded, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Tomorrow. We'll figure it out tomorrow." That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing Mom's handwriting, her fear etched in ink. Clara's words echoed too. What if it wasn't just cancer? By morning, I was resolved. We'd return to Willow House, not as guests, but as seekers of truth. Whatever Margaret was hiding, we'd find it. The morning of September 22, 2025, dawned grey and heavy, the sky threatening rain as Clara and I planned our return to Willow House. We sat at her cluttered kitchen counter, the diary open between us, its pages a map to questions we couldn't yet answer. Clara traced Mom's handwriting with her finger, her expression fierce. I sipped lukewarm coffee, my stomach knotted with unease. Confronting Margaret, or worse, sneaking into her domain, felt like stepping into a trap. But Mom's words, her fear, demanded action. "We can't just knock and ask for answers," I said, setting my mug down.
Margaret's too sharp.
"She'll deflect or worse, figure out we're onto her." Clara nodded, her eyes scanning the diary. "We need to get inside without her knowing. There's got to be more. Letters, documents, something she didn't destroy.
Mom hid the diary for a reason.
Maybe there's other stuff in the house." I leaned back thinking. Willow House was Margaret's fortress now, but we knew its secrets. Creaky floorboards, hidden nooks. As kids, Clara and I had played hide-and-seek in its sprawling rooms. The attic, the cellar, Mom's old study, they were ours once. If Margaret was hiding anything, those were the places to look. "I have an idea," I said. Margaret's hosting that charity auction next weekend, right? She mentioned it at the party. The house will be busy, staff coming and going. We could slip in, blend with the chaos. Clara's lips curved into a grim smile. Perfect. She'll be distracted, playing queen.
VLL Bigosts.
We spent the day planning. Clara sketched a rough map of Willow House from memory, marking entrances and rooms we'd search. I checked Margaret's social media. Sure enough, she'd posted about the auction, set for September 28th. Photos showed the ballroom being prepped, tables draped in gold cloth, chandeliers gleaming. The event was a spectacle, just like Margaret. By evening, we had a plan. We'd pose as catering staff, using fake name tags to blend in. Clara knew a friend who'd worked events at Willow House and could get us uniforms. We'd enter through the service door near the kitchen, search the study and attic during the auction's peak, and slip out before anyone noticed. It was risky, but the diary's weight, Mom's warning, made it worth it. The week crawled by. I buried myself in freelance work, trying to distract from the growing dread. Clara texted updates. She'd secured the uniforms, practiced our cover story. On September 27th, we met at her apartment to rehearse. Dressed in black slacks and white shirts, we looked the part, but my hands shook as I pinned on my name tag, Sarah. Clara's read Liz. You ready? She asked, adjusting her collar. No, I admitted. But we're doing this. She squeezed my shoulder, a rare gesture of warmth. For Mom. We drove to Willow House the next afternoon, arriving as the sun dipped low. The estate buzzed with activity, vans unloading crates, staff scurrying across the lawn. We parked a block away and approached the service entrance, heads down. A harried coordinator barely glanced at our tags before waving us in. Inside, the kitchen was chaos, clattering pans, shouted orders. We grabbed trays of appetizers and moved into the ballroom, keeping our faces neutral. Margaret was there, radiant in a sapphire gown, directing staff with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't notice us, but my heart pounded every time her gaze swept the room. At 7 p.m., the auction began. Guests in tuxedos and gowns filled the ballroom, their chatter drowning out the string quartet. Clara nudged me, and we slipped away, abandoning our trays in a corner. The hallway was quiet, the oak paneling unchanged from our childhood. We moved quickly, climbing the back staircase to the second floor. Mom's study was at the end of the corridor, its door locked. Clara pulled a hairpin from her pocket and knelt, her fingers deft. Learned this in college, she muttered. The lock clicked, and we slipped inside. The room was unrecognizable. Mom's bookshelves were gone, replaced by sleek cabinets. A glass desk held files and a laptop, all stamped with Margaret's logo. I rifled through drawers while Clara checked the cabinets, our movements frantic. Anything? I whispered. Nothing yet, she hissed, pulling out folders.
Just Businessstuf.
I opened a drawer and found a stack of old photos. Mom, Dad, us as kids. My throat tightened, but I pushed them aside. Beneath was a small key, taped to the drawer's bottom.
Clara, Isaid, holding it up.
This could be something. She grabbed it, her eyes scanning the room. There's a locked box in the cabinet. Hang on. She retrieved a metal box, its lock matching the key. Inside were letters, yellowed and brittle, addressed to Mom. The postmarks were from 2018, the same year as the diary. I unfolded one, my hands trembling. Anna, you're making a mistake, it read. David's future is with me. Walk away, or you'll lose more than you think. No signature, but the tone, cold, commanding, was Margaret's.
Clara read over my shoulder, Herr Britt Hitching. This is IT proof.
We stuffed the letters into my bag, but footsteps echoed in the hall. Clara froze, her eyes wide. I grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a curtain just as the door opened.
Margarets voice kut trug sie längse.
Check the study. I don't trust the new staff. The footsteps grew louder, Margaret's voice sharp as a blade in the quiet study. Check every corner, she instructed, her tone laced with suspicion.
Clara and I presset ourselves against the wall behind the heavy velvet curtain. The letters stuffed into my back digging into my hip.
My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the distant hum of the auction downstairs. It was September 28, 2025, just past 7:30 p.m., and we were inches from being caught. Clara's hand gripped mine, her fingers cold. I could barely make out her eyes in the dim light filtering through the curtain, but they were wide with fear and defiance. The door creaked as someone, likely one of Margaret's staff, entered the study. Drawers opened, papers rustled. I held my breath, praying the curtain wouldn't sway. "Nothing out of place, ma'am," a man's voice said after what felt like an eternity.
Margarets heels clicked closer.
"Good. Lock it and keep an eye on the holes."
I don't want surprises to nicht. The door shut, and the lock clicked.
Silence followed, but we didn't move, not until the footsteps faded completely.
Clara exhaled shakily, pulling back the curtain.
"That was too close," she whispered. "We've got what we came for," I said, patting the bag.
"Let's get out."
But escaping wasn't simple. The study door was locked from the outside, and the hallway was now under watch. Clara scanned the room, her mind racing. "The window," she said, pointing to the tall pane overlooking the garden. "It's our only shot."
I hesitated.
We were on the second floor, and the drop was steep, but the trellis outside, overgrown with ivy, might hold us. "Okay," I said, swallowing my fear. "You first." Clara pushed the window open, the cool night air rushing in. She climbed out, her catering uniform catching on the frame, and gripped the trellis. It groaned under her weight but held. I followed, my hands slick with sweat as I clung to the vines. The letters in my bag felt heavier with every step, a reminder of what we'd risked. We reached the ground, landing softly in the shadow of the rosebushes. Mom's rosebushes, where Clara had found the diary a week ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. The auction's music drifted from the ballroom, masking our movements as we crept toward the service entrance. We shed our name tags, tossing them into a bush, and slipped into the chaos of the catering vans. No one stopped us as we reached my car, parked a block away.
Inside, I started the engine, my hands trembling.
Clara clutched the bag, her knuckles white. "We did it," she said, her voice a mix of relief and triumph.
"We've got proof."
"Not enough," I said, pulling onto the road. "These letters show Margaret threatened Mom, but it's not a smoking gun. We need more, something that ties her to Mom's illness or Dad's will." Clara nodded, her jaw tight. "Then we read everything."
Every word in the diary, every letter. Therese got to be a clue.
We drove to my apartment, the city lights blurring past. It was nearly 9 p.m. when we spread the letters and diary on my dining table. The letters were chilling. More demands for Mom to step aside, hints at consequences. One, dated July 2018, mentioned a meeting with Dad's lawyer, a name I recognized, Richard Hale. He'd handled Dad's estate after his death. "That's our next move," Clara said, tapping the letter. "We find Hale. If Margaret was scheming with him, he'll know something." I agreed, but exhaustion was creeping in. "Tomorrow," I said. "We need rest, and we need to be smart."
Margaret's suspicious now. Shall elle be wetting?
Clara reluctantly agreed, taking the diary with her for safekeeping. Alone, I lay awake, the letter's words looping in my mind. Mom had been scared, isolated, and we'd been too young to notice. Guilt gnawed at me, but so did anger. Margaret had taken our home, our family, maybe more. The next morning, September 29th, I called Richard Hale's office. His secretary said he was semi-retired but agreed to meet us that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. Clara and I arrived early, the diary and letters tucked in a folder. Hale, a wiry man in his 60s with sharp eyes, greeted us with a cautious smile. "You're Anna's girls," he said, sipping his espresso. "I was sorry to hear about your parents." "Thanks," I said, cutting to the chase. "We're here about Margaret. We found letters suggesting she influenced Dad's will. Maybe more."
Hales smile faded. "That's a serious accusation."
"Margaret was ambitious, yes. But your father's will was clear. He wanted her to have Willow House." Clara leaned forward, her voice low. "What about before Mom died? Did Margaret meet with you in 2018? Hale hesitated, his fingers tightening around his cup. Once or twice.
Business matters. Noting unusual.
Business like threatening our mother? Clara pressed, sliding a letter across the table. Hale scanned it, his face unreadable. This is troubling, but it's not proof of anything. Look, I'll check my old files, but I'd be careful. Margaret's well connected. If you're wrong, she'll bury you. He left shortly after, promising to call if he found anything. Clara stared after him, her expression dark. He knows more than he's saying.
Maybe Isaid, unesi.
But we need him to talk. Let's give him time. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. My blood ran cold. Clara got the same message. Margaret was closing in, and we were running out of time. The anonymous text messages arrived on September 29, 2025, chilling Clara and me to the core. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. We sat in my apartment that evening, the diary and letters spread across the table, their secrets now a dangerous weight. The city outside hummed with life, but inside, the air was thick with fear and resolve. Margaret knew we were onto her, and her warning only fueled our determination. We can't stop now, Clara said, her voice steady despite the tension in her eyes.
She's scared.
That means we're close. I nodded, though my stomach churned. Richard Hale, the lawyer, hadn't called back, and his evasiveness gnawed at me. We need to push Hale, I said. He's our best lead. If he's hiding something, we'll make him talk. The next morning, September 30th, we drove to Hale's office, unannounced. His secretary tried to turn us away, but Clara's glare and my insistence got us through. Hale was behind his desk, surrounded by files, his face paling as we entered. You didn't call, I said, crossing my arms. We're not leaving until you tell us what you know about Margaret and Mom. Hale sighed, rubbing his temples.
Jure stiering ab trouble you don't understand.
Margaret's powerful. She has friends, lawyers, judges. Then tell us the truth, Clara snapped, slamming a letter on his desk. This says you met her in 2018. What was she planning? Hale stared at the letter, his resolve crumbling. Fine, he said finally. In 2018, Margaret came to me about your father's assets. She wanted to secure Willow House, even before your mother's illness. I told her it wasn't possible. Anna was still alive, and David's will favored her. But Margaret, she was relentless. She hinted at changes coming, things I didn't want to know about. Changes like what?
I press it, my heart pounding.
Hale looked away. I don't know specifics. But a few months later, Anna got sick. Then David changed his will fast, before his own accident. I always wondered, but I had no proof. Clara's hands clenched into fists. You suspected Margaret did something to Mom and did nothing? I'm telling you now, Hale said, his voice low. There's a file, in my storage unit. Correspondence from Margaret, some of it coded. I kept it as insurance. If you want it, it's yours, but I'm done after this. He gave us the storage unit's address and key code. We left without another word, the weight of his confession heavy. At the storage facility, a dusty box held the file, emails, notes, and a cryptic letter from Margaret to an unnamed contact, dated 2019, mentioning removing obstacles and securing the estate. It wasn't a confession, but it was damning. That night, we pored over the file and diary, piecing together a timeline. Mom's illness, Dad's rewritten will, his car accident in 2020. Margaret's shadow loomed over it all. Clara's theory, that Mom's cancer might have been induced, felt less far-fetched now. We found a note in the diary mentioning a strange gift from Margaret, a bottle of wine Mom never drank. It was a long shot, but it was something. We take this to the police, I said, my voice firm.
And we confront Margaret.
She needs to know we're not backing down. Clara agreed, her eyes blazing. Tomorrow. At Willow House.
Wie entsis.
On October 1, 2025, we drove to the estate, the diary and file in a locked case. Margaret was home, her car in the driveway. We knocked, and she opened the door, her smile faltering as she saw us. Eleanor Clara, she said, her voice smooth but guarded. "What's this about?" "We know," Clara said, stepping forward. "About Mom, the threats, the will. We have proof." Margaret's eyes narrowed, but she gestured us inside. In the living room, she sat, poised as ever. "Proof of what?" "Your mother was sick. Your father made his choices." I opened the case, spreading the letters and file on the coffee table. "You threatened Mom. You manipulated Dad. And we're not the only ones who know." Hale's ready to talk. Margaret's composure cracked, her fingers tightening on the armrest.
"Jure grasping at shadows."
"Those are old letters, nothing more." "Then explain this," Clara said, holding up the diary, open to Mom's final entry. "She was scared of you. She hid this because of you." Margaret stood, her face pale. "Get out. You're delusional, both of you." "We're going to the police," I said, gathering the papers. "This isn't over." As we turned to leave, Margaret's voice stopped us.
"You'll ruin yourselves. No one will believe you over me."
Clara spun back, her voice low. "We'll take that chance. For Mom." We left, the door slamming behind us. At the police station, we filed a report, handing over the diary, letters, and file. The detective was skeptical but promised to investigate, especially the wine bottle's potential. It wasn't closure, but it was a start. Driving home, Clara stared at the road, her hands steady now. "Do you think we'll win?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But we're fighting. That's what Mom would have wanted." The rosebushes, the diary, the truth. They'd brought us here, to a reckoning years in the making.
Vate kjem next, vet fes et togeter.